John Candy's death stunned the world, but the comedian himself had anticipated his demise for decades. Ever since the death of his own father by heart attack 38 years earlier, the beloved comedian believed that he would meet a similar fate. And he did. Fans were likely shocked when John Candy died because they believed that the comedic icon was just as jovial and upbeat in real life as he was on the silver screen. Indeed, Candy was a selfless animal lover and generously contributed to numerous charities. According to his children, however, Candy did his best to take care of himself despite his vices. Perhaps he was still deeply affected by his formative years, during which his father died at age 35, and an injury prevented him from becoming the college football player he aspired to be. But Candy found solace in comedy. He joined up with the improvisational group Second City in his native Toronto, and later in Chicago. His writing work was widely recognized and awarded, and he was cast in some of the most iconic comedies of the 1980s. Just like that, Candy became a household name. As his fame skyrocketed, however, so did his vices. Then, in 1994, John Candy died suddenly while filming a movie in Mexico. He left behind 2 children, colleagues who remember him fondly, and movies that are Thanksgiving and Christmas staples. His life was rich and exciting, and John Candy's death came as a blow to anyone who was touched by it. Before John Candy died, his comedic skills, openness, and humility made him beloved by all audiences. "I think that's what draws people into a lot of those characters, you felt for them," explained his son Chris. "And that is something he came into the world with, that vulnerability." Hollywood icons like Steve Martin and John Hughes also struggled to comprehend the reality of Candy's death. "He was a very sweet guy, very sweet and complicated," Martin said. "He was always friendly, always outgoing, funny, nice, and polite, but I could tell he had kind of a little broken heart inside him. He was a brilliant actor, especially in planes, trains, and automobiles. I think it was his best work." But Candy's legacy was built on far more than mere movie stardom and acting talent. The comedian was a selfless contributor to charities like Make-A-Wish Foundation and the Pediatric AIDS Foundation. He rescued animals and felt a kinship to those who couldn't change their conditions. "He liked to make people laugh and feel good," said his daughter Jen. "And with certain kinds of charity work, especially with kids, he could do that, and that made him feel good." In October 2020, Toronto Mayor John Tory declared the actor's birthday John Candy Day. The night before he died, John Candy reached out to several people. He called his co-stars and his children, who had no idea it would be the last time they would ever hear their father's voice. "I was 9. It was a Friday," his son Chris recalled. "I remember talking to him the night before he passed away, and he said, 'I love you and good night,' and I will always remember that." But his daughter Jen has a more tragic final memory of her father. "I remember my dad the night before. I was studying for a vocabulary test. I was 14. He had just come home for my 14th birthday, which is February 3rd, so I was talking to him on the phone, and I hate this, but I was slightly distant because I was studying." The next day, on March 4th, 1994, 43-year-old John Candy returned to his hotel room after a day on the set of the Western parody Wagons East. It had been a particularly good day of shooting, during which Candy reportedly believed he had just delivered one of the best performances of his career, and he celebrated by cooking his assistants a late-night dinner. Yet Candy's son Chris recalled how everyone on set could see how his bad habits had caught up with him. "Richard Lewis, who worked with him on that movie, told me he was so much fun and so funny, but when he looked at my dad, he looked so tired." After dinner, Candy said goodnight to the cast and crew and retreated to his room to go to sleep. But he never woke up. John Candy died in his sleep, and his cause of death was heart failure, just like his father. His children were pulled out of Friday Mass at their school, St. Martin of Tours, and told the tragic news. "I cried hysterically for 5 minutes, and then I stopped," said Jennifer, "and then I was done crying in public for a while. It was a whirlwind after that point. That's when we really knew about paparazzi, because you had all the cameras." After dinner, Candy said goodnight to the cast and crew and retreated to his room to go to sleep. But he never woke up. John Candy died in his sleep, and his cause of death was heart failure, just like his father. His children were pulled out of Friday Mass at their school, St. Martin of Tours, and told the tragic news. "I cried hysterically for 5 minutes, and then I stopped," said Jennifer. "And then I was done crying in public for a while. It was a whirlwind after that point. That's when we really knew about paparazzi because you had all the cameras."